Good evening, everybody. Thanks again for listening. Hello, 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 everybody. Thanks again for listening. My name is Nelson E. Brown, and you are listening to the Beauty in Us Radio right here on Awesome God Radio. I am very excited to see you guys this evening. I am very excited to talk about tonight's topic with you guys tonight. It's been a really crazy week. In the past week, I've been preparing for midterm exams at my school at UMBC. I'm studying sociology, but I've been writing a lot of papers and I've been studying a lot of material, but I've been preparing for my midterms and I am about to go on spring break next week, which is something that I am definitely looking forward to because I have been working hard and I've been through so much in the past several months. It will definitely give me a chance to kind of woosah, for a bit. Throughout the course of next week, not having to worry about anything, but to just, exist for the next week and to just take a mental health break from all of the stuff that's been going on. But I'm going to be working through my exams this week and I'm going to shut it down this Friday after the close of business day until I return. But I'm really excited to be before you guys this evening. It is Tuesday, March 9th, 2021, and I have a very special guest this evening. She represents District 6 of the Anne Arundel County Council. Her name is Miss Lisa D.B. Rodvien, and she's a vice chairman, and she is going to be talking about her life as a lawyer, as an attorney, as well as an educator. And as you guys may know, just in case you don't know, it's Women's History Month. So throughout the course of the month of March, I am going to be highlighting women in various fields and in various occupations doing great work for our community and, for the people that they serve. Last week, I had Miss Nija Howard, but this week, Miss Lisa Rodvien and I are going to be talking about the education system, and we're also going to be talking about her life and her experience as an educator and as an attorney. So I'm going to read a snippet and a little bio, about her, but she's going to come on for the second half of the show from 6:30 to 7 p.m. to talk about that more in depth. But for the first half of the show, I want to talk about some stories that have really troubled my spirits, not just within this past week, but within the past few months. And I'm also going to be talking about Mary McLeod Bethune, a really historical figure in the African American community, in the Black community. So we have a lot to unpack tonight. So I'm just going to hop right into it. And I hope you guys really enjoy tonight's broadcast. And I hope that it sparks up a conversation. And I hope that you guys feel informed and inspired once this broadcast ends. So Lisa Rodvien is a public school teacher in Anne Arundel County, Maryland. While Ms. Rodvien currently teaches at Arundel Middle School in Odenton, Maryland, she began her work in the field of education as an attorney. In the early 2000s, she worked for a law firm that helped state education agencies implement the requirements of the No Child Left Behind Act. Eventually, she learned that she wanted to work directly with young people and transitioned to a career in teaching. She earned her bachelor's degree from Cornell University, her master's in education from George Mason University, and her Juris Doctor from the Catholic University of America, Columbus School of Law. Lisa lives in Annapolis, Maryland, with her husband, George Rodvien. So that's a small bio that I wanted to give you guys. She is going to join us for the second half of the show to talk about her life and her experience as an educator and as an attorney. And it's definitely going to tie into tonight's topic, which is about school systems, which is about education. And like I said, I've gathered a couple of articles. I've been really I've been doing a lot of reading and research, and I've been listening to a lot of stories within the past week and throughout the course of the month, several months actually. And there are a couple of stories in particular that I wanted to discuss. But before I jump into those, I want to talk about Mary McLeod Bethune. She was an African American, a prominent figure in the African American community. She was an educator and activist, and she served as the president of the National Association of Colored Women and she was the founder, of the National Council of Negro Women. That's the term that they used during those days and during that era. She grew up in Maysville, South Carolina, and she was born on July 10th, 1875. She was a leading educator and civil rights activist. She grew up in poverty as one of 17 children born to formerly enslaved people. Everyone in her family worked, and many worked in the fields, and many of them were enslaved, like I've mentioned before. But she became the one and only child in her family to go to school when a missionary opened a school nearby for African American children. She was traveling miles away. She walked to school each day and did her best to share her newfound knowledge with her family. She later received a scholarship to the Scotia Seminary, a school for girls, in Concord, North Carolina. After graduating from seminary in 1893, she went to the Dwight Moody's Institute for Home and Foreign Missions in Chicago. Bethune completed her studies there 2 years later. Returning to the South, she began her career as a teacher. For nearly a decade, she worked as an educator. She believed that education provided the key to racial advancement. To that end, she founded the Daytona Normal and Industrial Institute for Negro Girls, again, that's the term that they used during that era, in Daytona, Florida in 1904. Starting out with only 5 students, she helped grow the school to more than 250 students over the next years. She served as the school's president, and she remained its leader even after it was combined with the Cookman Institute for Men in 1923. The merged institution became known as the Bethune-Cookman College. The college was one of the few places that African American students could pursue a college degree. Bethune stayed with the college until 1942. In addition to her work at the school, Bethune did much to contribute to American society at large. She served as the president of the Florida chapter of the National Association of Colored Women for many years. In 1924, she became the organization's national leader, beating out a former fellow reformer, Ida B. Wells, for the top post. She also became involved in the government service, leading her expertise to several presidents. President Calvin Coolidge invited her to participate in a conference on child welfare. For President Herbert Hoover, she served on commission on home building and home ownership and was appointed to a committee on child health. But her most significant roles in public service came from President Franklin D. Roosevelt. In 1935, she became a special advisor to President Roosevelt on minority affairs. That same year, she also started up her own civil rights organization, the National Council of Negro Women. Bethune created this organization to represent numerous groups working on critical issues for African American women. She received another appointment from President Roosevelt the following year. In 1936, she became the director of the Division of Negro Affairs of the National Youth Administration. One of her main concerns in this position was helping young people find job opportunities. In addition to her official role in the Roosevelt administration, Bethune became a trusted friend and advisor to both the president and his wife, Eleanor Roosevelt. One of the nation's leading educators and activists, Bethune spent much of the rest of her life devoted to social causes after leaving Bethune-Cookman College in 1942. She took up residence at its new National Council of Negro Women headquarters in a Washington, D.C. townhouse in 1943 and lived there for several years. As an early member of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, she helped represent the group at the 1945 conference on the founding of the United Nations, along with W.E.B. Du Bois. I'm not sure if it's Du Bois or Du Bois. It's been used interchangeably, but I'm just going to say Du Bois. In the early 1950s, President Harry Truman appointed her to a committee on national defense and appointed her to serve as an official delegate to a presidential inauguration in Liberia. Eventually returning to Florida in her retirement, Bethune died on May 18, 1955 in Daytona, Florida. She is remembered for her work to advance the rights of both African Americans and women. Before her death, Bethune penned My Last Will and Testament, which served as a reflection of her own life and legacy, in addition to addressing a few estate matters. Among her list of spiritual bequests, she wrote, I leave you a thirst for education. Knowledge is the prime need of the hour. Bethune closed with, if I have a legacy to leave my people, it is my philosophy of living and serving. Since her passing, Bethune has been honored in many ways. In 1973, she was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. The U.S. Postal Service issued a stamp with her likeness in 1985. In 1994, the U.S. Park Service bought the former headquarters of the NCNW. The site is now known as the Mary McLeod Bethune Council House National Historic Site. And that's really, really, really impressive for me. I had learned a little bit about Mary McLeod Bethune in school for Black History Month, and solely for the purposes of Black History Month throughout the course of school, but I never really knew too much about her outside of what I learned in school, a snippet of what I learned about her in school. But she was one of the nation's top educators and civil rights activists, and her work has left a legacy for itself. So tonight, when we talk to Ms. Rodvien, we're going to talk about her experience as an educator and as an attorney, and how that plays a role into her work as a councilwoman for the 6th District in Anne Arundel County. But in addition to talking about Mary McLeod Bethune for the next hour, I want to talk a little bit about International Women's Day, which is what we celebrated yesterday to honor women in various capacities and in all walks of life. You know, from every shade, every race, every culture, every color, every female on this earth has been represented and has been celebrated yesterday. And we are going to continue to do that throughout the course of this month, in the month of March. So InternationalWomen'sDay.com actually produced an article. It's titled, Breaking Down Barriers for Women in Leadership. It says that the world needs women leaders from running companies to running countries. Gender equal leadership will lead to a more inclusive and effective society. Yet, even though women enter the workforce in relatively equal numbers as men, the rise to the top can be slower and harder for women. And with global talent shortages at a record high that is almost double that of a decade ago, it is critical to harness all potential talent in this era of high skills, shortage, and low unemployment. From having good workplace policies, processes, and support in place through to excellent benefits and a strong commitment to inclusion, here are some of the ways companies can aim to attract and retain more women leaders. I think it should say female leaders, personally. I think that's a typo, but I'm moving on. Offer workplace benefits beyond pay. Break the male line of succession. Increase the diversity of talent in STEM. And that's something that I talked about earlier on in a previous show when I first started. Seek employees who are willing to adapt, and encourage leaders to take responsibility for their actions. Now, these are some of the suggestions that have been given to break down barriers for women in the workplace, and also to promote diversity and inclusion in the workplace. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that during the second half of the show. But I don't want to spend too much time on any one subject, because I want to share some of the stories that I've collected and that I've read and done research about that ties into tonight's subject. And one was a story that was covered a few months ago from the Anne Arundel County Board of Education. And it was actually covered by the school superintendent for the Queen Anne's County school system. Her name is Dr. Andrea Kane. And what troubled me about this article was the fact that Dr. Kane filed a complaint and charges of discrimination with the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. But the content and the allegations that are listed in the complaint about the school board creating a hostile work environment for her really, really troubled my spirits. So this article came out a couple months ago in January, and the Queen Anne's County School Board is denying allegations of racial discrimination and retaliation made by the superintendent, of course. The school board issued the denial through an Annapolis attorney representing the district. But I'm not going to read too much of it in detail because it's still an open case, but this really, really troubled my spirit, because I think that her filing, charges of discrimination on the basis of her race is definitely a red flag that's gone up in my mind, because here we are, we are in the 2020s decade, we are in 2021, we are about to enter into the second quarter of 2021, and we've made so many improvements. We strive to make diversity and inclusion a huge part, not just in the school systems, but also in the workplace. So it just has me questioning, just reading that story about how she suffered discrimination on the basis of her race, and how the school board members created a hostile work environment for her, and even within the allegations that are contained in the complaint that she filed with the EEOC, it has me wondering, okay, are we really where we're supposed to be in terms of that, representing diversity and inclusion in all aspects, between gender equality, racial equality, and all of these other factors? Are we where we're supposed to be? Have we really come a long way? And have we really done our best to make sure that we are providing our employees and our students and our young people and even our seniors with the tools and the resources that they need, so that they can avoid any potential implicit bias that they may demonstrate consciously and unconsciously in the workplace and throughout the school systems? So that article, and reading that story and learning about that a little bit more, really, really troubled my spirits, because she talked about how she was retaliated against because of the activities, the job protected activities that she chose to participate in. And she also I'm not going to go into detail about it, but she gave a few examples of how she was chastised for participating in a job protected activity and for standing up for what she believed in. So I definitely think that when we talk to Ms. Rodvien for the second half of the show, we can learn about this a little bit more. But one story, and I'm not going to be quiet about it, because this really, really upset my nerves since last week when it came out, was Project Baltimore's story about an inner city student being promoted throughout the 4 years of his tenure in high school, and possibly having to repeat everything, only passing 3 classes in 2 years, and having so many unexcused absences. I mean, this story came out in Fox 45 in the Project Baltimore report, so you can look it up and you can watch it on the news later. But it really, really troubled my spirit as well. Both of these stories, between Dr. Kane suffering from racial discrimination and retaliation on the basis of her race and for participating in a job protected activity, to a student at an inner city high school who has been promoted to the next grade when he has not even really developed the necessary tools that he needs in order to move forward and to get jobs or to take advantage of other opportunities, because he hasn't really covered the basics of reading and writing and even mathematics. So looking at those two stories and and just listening to these stories, reading about this, doing my research, the sociologist in me, you guys know I'm a sociology student at UMBC. I always talk about that on my broadcast, but the sociologist in me really, really took a look at why both of those stories. And I took a look at Mary McLeod Bethune and the work that she's done in order to prevent all of this, and in order to create more diversity and inclusion for African Americans, other minorities, and women, and not just in the workplace, but also in the school systems, and also, for the people that she served, in several capacities. So I just want to ask you guys, as we celebrate Women's History Month and as we promote gender equality and racial equality, and because we are in the climate that we are in, do you think that we have really made the effort to promote diversity and inclusion in all forms, not just in the workplace, but also within our school systems? Because the breakdown between the community, the school systems, the parents, and the children has to really, really be examined when we talk about subjects like these. So, it's our responsibility as adults to prepare children, students, for the future. It's our responsibility as adults to make sure that they have what they need so that they can take advantage of all of the opportunities that are out here nowadays. I'm not a parent yet, obviously, but I know that my mom has definitely instilled in me growing up, and she still does. She instilled in me the importance of getting a quality education and taking advantage of opportunities and going after what I want. So that's been instilled in me forever. My mom was definitely an active person in the school systems. Every parent-teachers conference, volunteering, checking to see what was going on and just keeping herself in the loop 24/7, not letting anything slip through the cracks was her number one priority. And she's a part of the reason why I'm on top of things now, especially as a college student. When you are in school and when you are learning and when you are trying to advance, in different areas of your life, it is really, really important, especially, from a young age, all the way through as you become a young adult and as you grow into a young adult. As a young person, it's important for parents and community members to stay active and to stay involved. And it's not always the fault of the educators or the administrators in the school system. Sometimes the parents have to be held accountable for not being active as well. Sometimes parents in the school systems have to be held accountable for not being active participants in terms of, making sure that their sons and daughters get a quality education and to make sure that nothing is falling through the cracks and that they're not falling behind. So when I read the story about this young man who has been promoted to the next grade, even when he hasn't even passed all of his classes or even with all of his unexcused absences, when I read that story and when I watched it and did my research about it, it really, really troubled my spirits because, I wish that I could just speak to that young man myself. And I wish that I could just, comfort him in any way I can. Because what boggles my mind is that how can someone allow someone to, how can these educators, these adults, these leaders, how can they let this fall through the cracks? How many kids have they done this to? How many more kids are suffering from this? So that's why I'm glad that this issue is being investigated, and that's why I'm glad that we have an opportunity to see what went wrong. We have an opportunity to see what fell through the cracks and how many students have been affected by this, because we all have to take responsibility. Community members, parents, educators, administrators, we all are supposed to work together. We all have a responsibility to work hand in hand in terms of figuring out how to fix this, problems like these. And in terms of Dr. Kane's case of racial discrimination or retaliation for participating in a job protected activity and for exercising her rights and for standing up for what she believed in, we have to figure out how to prevent that from happening again, especially in the climate that we're in now. Learning about how to support each other and uplift each other and encourage each other, that's what is more important. And that is what we have to learn how to do. It's not always about collecting a check. It's also about doing the work. It's also about doing your job. It's also about making sure that nobody falls behind, because the students, the young people like myself, even the children who are coming after me, who are being brought up, they're the ones who are going to be the future. We are the future. We have so many things at our disposal. We have so many resources, and we have so many job opportunities and just opportunities in general that are just out there for us to take advantage of. But we need those tools. We need the support from our loved ones, our parents, our educators, the administrators, community members, everyone. We need everyone to help us. We can't accomplish our dreams, set goals, and to live out our lives pursuing what we want to pursue on our own. We can't do this on our own. So that's why it's important for all of us to work together. And that's why it's important for all of us to be held accountable for what is successful and also for what is failing. Because at the end of the day, we are all suffering from this. It's not just about money. It's not about the educators, the school administrators. It's not about casting blame. It's about figuring out the most effective solutions in order to figure out how to move forward. I really love that I have the opportunity to speak to a lifelong educator tonight. And I love the fact that she's also an attorney, because maybe she can help me figure out what to do. Maybe she can help me figure out, why things are the way they are in the school systems nowadays. Because, I know that, like I said before, for me, I had an active parent. My mom was a very, very active participant from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. She was on it. Every parent-teachers conference, every chance she had to volunteer, every chance she had to see what was going on, every chance that she had to stay in the loop, she was on it. Nothing fell through the cracks. All of the resources, all of the tools, she made sure that her and my educators, I'm not sure if I said that sentence right, but her and my educators, they made sure that we were all working together in order to get me to where I wanted to be. Because it's not all about collecting a check. It's not about just having titles when it comes to education or when it comes to being a leader in the school systems. It's also about doing what's best for the students. It's also about doing what's best for the parents. It's also about doing what's best for future leaders, people who are coming behind you, people who are looking at you to be their role models, their examples, and for inspiration. So that's something that we have to really, really think really, really long and hard about. And once Miss Rodvien joins us shortly, I'm going to bring both of these stories to her attention, because I just want to know how she's feeling about all of this, especially with us being in the virtual learning environment. I know things are starting to open back up. Some students have recently just gone back to the in-person learning in the classrooms for the in-person learning so that they can have some sense of normalcy. But we are also really, really concerned about the safety of our kids, about the safety of our young people who are trying to navigate the virtual learning environment or, in the pandemic, the hundreds of thousands of lives that have been lost due to COVID-19. So there are so many obstacles that have been put in front of us to battle. I just want to see where everybody's frame of minds are at. I just want to see how everybody's doing. And I think that by speaking to an educator and someone who's worked in the field of law, fighting for these causes, advocating for these causes, I think that that would be really, really beneficial for all of us, because all of us may not know what to do. All of us may not have the solutions at our disposal right away. All of us may not know how to move forward. So that's why it's important for all of us to use these resources and to use people, mentors, people in our peer groups, people from different walks of life with different knowledge of expertise, so that we can all help each other figure out, what the solutions are or how we can fix this. Because I don't believe that when in terms of talking about the school systems in the field of education, I believe that children can achieve anything and everything they want. The key is how to do it. So it's unacceptable for me to look at stories like these, or to listen to stories like these, or to read about this and to just be okay with it. It's unacceptable for me to do that. So that's what we're going to talk about this evening. Okay, so now we have Miss Lisa Rodvien on with us to talk about her work as a councilwoman for the 6th District of Arundel County. Ms. Rodvien, how are you? I know we've had some difficulties a little earlier on, but we're going to navigate through this. So how are you doing this evening? I would like to thank you for, agreeing to come on and taking time out of your schedule. Yeah, it's really, really nice to meet you this evening. I thank you for, again, agreeing to come on. I'm not sure if you're able to hear me or not, but we've had a little bit of technical difficulties earlier on, but how are you doing? Okay, well, as we navigate through these issues, like I said, everybody, please bear with us. We've had some technical difficulties before the show. We've been trying to iron out the kinks. We've been trying to figure out, how to navigate through all of the difficulties, but please bear with us as we continue to move through these difficulties and through all of these challenges. She may be getting another device in order to stream this. I may have to book her for another show if this doesn't work out, but it still doesn't change the topic for tonight. So please, again, everybody, please bear with us as we continue to navigate through all of these challenges. We've been trying to figure out all of this, before the show. So I hope that things can work out, but if not, I will book her for another show so that she can sit down with us and talk about her experience as an attorney and as an educator in the school systems. Okay, so she just told me that she's going to grab another device so that she can stream, so that she can, talk about, her topic, her input on. She can provide her input for tonight's discussion. So we're just going to wait for her to set all of that up so that we can move forward. I might go past 7 today so that we can make up for the time that we've lost because of these challenges, but I still want to encourage you all to just bear with us as we navigate through all of these challenges. I still want you guys, I want you guys to take the time to think about some of the things that I've shared this evening, between the stories and between the life and the legacy of Mary McLeod Bethune, and just thinking about all of that and just putting all of that into consideration when we talk about education and when we have a conversation about, gender equality, racial equality. All of that goes hand in hand. But more specifically, when we talk about Women's History Month, or when we celebrate women in all capacities, we have to think about this. Dr. Kane's case, in his case. Okay, so hello, are you with us, Ms. Rodvien?
Yes, and I can hear you.
Yes, thank you again for navigating through all of these challenges. It's been a little tough, but I'm glad that you had the opportunity to sit down with us to talk about your experience, as a councilwoman for the 6th District of Arundel County, and about your life and your career as an educator and as an attorney. So I had a conversation in the first half of the show about 2 stories that have aired and that I've read and researched. One is about the school superintendent for the Queen Anne's County Board of Education, who filed an EEOC complaint because she said that she was being discriminated on the basis of her race and for retaliation and on the basis of retaliatory harassment when she participated in a job protected activity. And I also have another story about a young man from the city of Baltimore who was promoted through the next grades and who did not only pass 3 classes out of the 4 years that he was attending school, and about all of his unexcused absences. And I just shared some stories with the listeners for the first half of the show about these stories and about the work that Mary McLeod Bethune did, not just for the African American community, but also for gender equality for women, the work that she did for women in order to promote diversity and inclusion. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about your work as a councilwoman, and also about your work as an educator and as an attorney, and how you use that to move forward, in your work that you do, in the council with your colleagues and everything. So we might go a little bit over 7 to make up for the time that we lost, but this is worth it. So could you tell us a little bit about it, your experience?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. It's definitely been an interesting path to get to the point that I'm in now, but I think in hindsight, the pieces all fit together. So I had sort of always had like a social justice heart, and that is what drove me to go to law school. And after law school, I worked briefly in the field of education law, and ultimately decided that that my social justice heart actually wanted me to be a teacher in the classroom. And so I went back to school again and got a master's in education. And then I started teaching. And I first worked with ESOL students, or English for speakers of other languages, or now called English language learners, ELL students. And at the time I had, my husband's formerly in the Army. And so we were living, we were living in Hawaii, which was a wonderful and really interesting experience in terms of the public school system there. But we ended up moving here to Maryland, and he, now works at Fort Meade, and I found a job working in Arundel County, and actually in Annapolis High School, which I love. It's a really special high school. It's extremely diverse. It has just a really wonderful energy and brings a lot of people together. A lot of students from, different communities and, different kinds of families together in one school community. And that makes it a really, and it's still that way today, makes it a really special place. But like the young man that you described, I think I saw that story in the newspaper. Where did you see that today? I saw that today too. And it just actually, that reminded me of, I had a lot of students that, young African-American male students who had gotten to high school and were really, really struggling, or had really just sort of, you could tell from their disposition that they had given up. They felt like this wasn't for them, and they were kind of going through the motions. And, as a teacher, that's a challenge, to try and find motivation in students who feel like, or who you sense have already given up on the whole idea of school. But at the same time, you also acknowledge that they're coming to school every day. And so something is pulling them there. It was very challenging. And I will admit that one of the things that drove me to make that next step, which again, I feel like it is all interconnected, was that I didn't have the resources, and the school didn't have the resources really to, by ourselves, get the young men that were in our school, that were, in particular, this category of young men who had this sort of sense of, not necessarily, not necessarily putting all of their effort into school. And I don't want to speculate why. I mean, there's a million reasons why someone doesn't put effort into school. But I felt like as a teacher by myself, I didn't have the resources to help these young men, even though they were bright young men. And I didn't have the resources to help them get on track. I felt like the school by itself didn't have the resources to help the young men get on track. And it was going to be something much broader than what one teacher could do in one classroom to really make a change that would provide a better path. And, you hear stories, and there's been a lot of movies about, these teachers who come in and they do amazing things. And I know that they're out there and they're very gifted teachers, but I think in the reality is like we need to look for broader solutions than, an occasional hero or heroine of a teacher who somehow has that magical gift because, they're extremely rare. The Erin Gruwel's of the world. She was featured in the movie Freedom Writers. And even when they have that special gift, the way our public school system is working right now, teachers that are really gifted burn out very quickly and don't stay in the system long. And I could have my facts straight, but I'm pretty sure Erin Gruwel herself is no longer a teacher in the public school system. I think she maybe still works in the field of education, but that's a really typical pattern that it just takes so much. And so I think, my thought about running for council was, definitely connected to what I had learned in teaching in the public schools. And by the way, I'm still teaching in the public schools. I'm now at a middle school up in Odenton, which I also love. It's actually another very diverse community. The students, obviously in middle school, I have younger students. But I really, I think that's actually really important for me to sort of keep grounded, to stay teaching, so I'm always, every single day, I'm talking with the students or occasionally their family members who are directly impacted by the policies that the council creates. So to me, it's really, it's like a way of, staying connected with, very well connected with the people I want to serve. So that's just to get you started.
Yes, and I definitely do appreciate you for sharing your experience as an educator with us, and it definitely gives us a better idea of, how you got started, how you started your career as a councilwoman, for the 6th district in Arundel County. And I think that, and like I said, when I read this story and when I listened to this story, I do know that, in terms of talking about the city of Baltimore, there have been many, many issues that have been discussed for several years. And even though that you're not a part of that jurisdiction, I know that Anne Arundel County, as a councilwoman, I know that you definitely have an opportunity to implement some of the knowledge and expertise you have in this area, and you present this to your colleagues when we talk about education, because I know that it's not just an issue about money. I know that it's not just about, a lot of people like to cast blame, between the school administrators to the teachers to the parents, but I always look at it as just all of us working together. I think that that's what's more important. How have you, especially because of the climate that we're in now, as an educator, how have you been able to navigate through all of the obstacles, and how have you been able to work with your colleagues, between the school administrators to your fellow educators to other counselors, who you work with every day? How have you been able to manage all of that throughout the past year?
So I will just admit right off the bat, it's been enormously challenging. Obviously, COVID changed, the pandemic changed many aspects, and for some people, every aspect of their life. And that certainly changed every aspect of teaching, or almost every aspect of teaching. And it changed many aspects of governing on the county council. All of a sudden, the priorities completely shifted. The last bill that I had been working on before the COVID, before the epidemic hit, or the pandemic hit, was a bill to allow or to help the county collect tax revenue from Airbnb, short-term vacation rentals, like Airbnb and VRBO and that kind of thing, when people are renting out their homes. And you think about like where we've come, so what we've been working on since then. We went very much into we went into things just sort of crisis mode. How can we help people that, very quickly lost their jobs? You've probably seen on, the national news, there have been places where you would have a food line miles and miles long. And while Annapolis maybe didn't have food lines miles and miles long, we did have food lines with hundreds and hundreds of people. And so just trying to figure out how can we help people meet their basic needs in this time of crisis. And obviously, there's been a lot of discussion about how the pandemic has opened up, or I would say just laid bare. I mean, things that I think I was already aware of because I had seen them in my work in the public schools, but just enormous inequities between communities were just, exacerbated by the pandemic. And so, trying to step in, trying to use the relief that came from the federal government or that came through the state, but from the federal government to really help our community and, help people stay on their feet. It's definitely been a challenge. But at the same time, and teaching has been a challenge too. Actually today, hybrid learning just started in Anne Arundel County Public Schools. For the middle school, it started yesterday. Elementary school started a week ago. But today was the first day I taught a class with, in the hybrid model where I had some students, literally like looking at a screen the way that I guess probably a lot of folks out there are looking at a computer screen right now, with my 25 little boxes of my students on the screen and then 15 students in person. So it was literally the first time that I had kids singing in my classroom for almost a year. I'm a music teacher. I teach choral music. So it's just been a strange path, to train. I mean, music of all things to teach online is a very strange thing. You can't sing together really because that tiny little delay in the signal is enough that you're out of sync. And timing is everything in music. So that's been a really interesting challenge. Oh my goodness, I don't even know. Like, there's so many different aspects of it. Trying to figure out how how to keep kids connected. I think that was one of the challenges early on, and I think our county school system really used the federal funding wisely to try and get every single child a Chromebook and help as many people as they possibly could get access to good internet. So that was, just trying to figure out how many people were on sort of the wrong side of the digital divide and how do we close that gap so everyone's on the right side of the digital divide. So that's been enormous. You mentioned the idea of working with coworkers and working with administrators. And I will say that that has been a challenge too. Usually in the regular in-person environment, you can walk next door to and talk to your colleague, but things are just not like that. So you wait for a structured meeting or maybe schedule a phone call or schedule a meet. Has created just a different way of communicating. And that's not to say that we're not working with each other and we're not helping, but it's definitely taken those informal conversations that you have all the time working in a school, with your colleagues. That's taken that out of the picture. So we're actually just getting back to that, being back in the building. So I at least see my colleagues, but we try to keep our distance because we're still in a pandemic and we're not all vaccinated yet.
Yes, absolutely. I know it's definitely a challenge for everybody to navigate through all of this. I know that, I'm a college student myself. I study sociology at the University of Maryland in Baltimore County. And we haven't gotten back into the on campus yet. We're still in a full virtual learning environment. And, our school we've had to even conduct graduations virtually. And I'm thinking that I'm probably going to end up doing the same thing too, because I'm finishing school too. So I'm thinking that I'm going to have to do everything virtually as well. And it's really a shame that, we all don't get that same, on-campus experience and that virtual experience, but it does give us an opportunity to be creative about how we choose to celebrate. But so I guess, it has its pros and its cons.
Absolutely.
So how important do you think it is, not in terms of this story about this young man who has been promoted to the next grade, and all the way through high school, and may possibly have to repeat everything. So how do you think, because I was just, like I said, I was reading that story and I was listening to it, and I'm just thinking about not only his mom, but about everybody else who may have played a role in like that as being the outcome, his outcome. Because I don't think that, of course, I don't like casting blame on anybody, but I feel like everybody has to, accept their part in that outcome, in terms of him not having all of the resources that he needs and the tools that he needs so that he could move forward, and so that he can get a job, gain those skills and that education, so that he can, just have a great life and, move forward. Especially for him, being a young man, from his background, I think it's really, really important for everybody to, accept their part in it and figure out the effective solutions to move forward. So how important do you think it is for parents to stay active in the midst of all of this, in terms of making sure that, their children are, making sure that they're involved in their children's education, and making sure that, they know what's going on and that they're constantly in the loop? Because like I shared in the beginning of my show, like throughout the course of me being from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, my mom was there. Every parent teachers conference, every meeting, every PTSA meeting, like she was on it, like nonstop. And she's part of the reason why I am where I am today. As a college student studying sociology, she's helped prepare me for where I am today. And by her being active, an active volunteer, an active participant, just being involved every step of the way has really, really made an impact. So how important do you think that is for parents to stay in the loop now? Because a lot of parents have been really, really stressed and really, really frustrated with everything, and that some of them feel like they just want to throw in the towel. And I don't think that that's the best thing to do, but what advice would you give to them right now?
I would say do everything you can, and I know it's enormously stressful. I mean, I know I have students who have who have parents who've lost their job, or they had a single parent, they were in a single parent family, and that single provider lost their job. And then add to that, a lot of families are dealing with the grief of a COVID loss, or even just a very sick relative, or the fear of, passing COVID on to a loved one. So I think that the combination of all of those stresses is enormous. I think, the more that we can do, to the extent that parents are able, you've got to, it's so critical. The schools are stretched very thin. We have already in Anne Arundel County, really in every locale, probably across, maybe there's one or two, maybe Howard County somehow is pulling it off, but there's pretty much a teacher shortage across the state and across the nation. And I think it's, that's a whole separate conversation, but I think the takeaway from that is just knowing how thin schools are spread right now. And they're trying to take on a lot of different roles that maybe in the past weren't something, that the schools would have done. You see, I know, for example, in Anne Arundel County, we've had, free and reduced price meals for students for a long time. But now, we're providing both lunch and dinner to any student, not just to students who qualify, by an income level. So students are, the schools are providing meals. Schools are providing school materials. Like I know at the beginning of the school year, they sent home backpacks with, with school supplies for kids for grades K through 5. And communities really tried to step up. So, to the extent that parents are able, it's absolutely critical. And I think, you have I can't, we just met today, but I think the fact that you identified that your mom stayed on your case, you probably realize, and maybe you have had the occasion to observe someone else who didn't have that kind of parent staying on their case, that pushed them through even when you felt like, why am I doing this? Or I have no idea what your what your personal experience was. So I'm really thinking of some other student that I've met at some other time, but parents absolutely do everything you can. because there may not be anyone else, and that's terrifying. There's some structural problems that I think, I don't know all the ins and outs of Baltimore City public schools, but I do know that that there are a lot of pressures. Sometime in the past few decades, there was some research done that indicated that if a student was held behind a grade, their chances of graduating from high school decreased significantly, and that makes sense. But I think the result was to really push schools to make sure that students got on to the next grade, no matter what. And I suspect that, without knowing details of the case, that probably played a part, in the fact that somehow this student, he'd only passed 3 classes, or the situation, how, that doesn't even compute. So somehow that, sort of that, I guess, that model that resulted from, that concern about not passing students on to the next grade, has maybe gone so far in the opposite direction that we don't, slow down and make sure that kids get help when they need it. There's, issues of standardization in education. Students don't come one size fits all. And of course, we want to, push students to challenge themselves as much as possible. But we need to make sure that they have all the resources that they can to do that. And, some of those resources can be provided by the school, but some of them, I can't even imagine some of the things kids have to worry about. I've had kids, and I teach middle school. So these aren't even like the high school kids who I think even can end up with even higher burdens. I've had middle school kids saying, "Hey, Miss Rodvien, I need to leave this meet because my little sister in elementary school needs help with her assignment and there's no one else that can help her." And, I know that they're telling me the truth. Like they're for real. They're not saying, I want to get out of class. They're saying my little sister needs my help. And can I miss the last 10 minutes of chorus class so I can go help my little sister? And, I try to make the right judgment call and say, yeah, go help your sister. So a lot of resources, like I said, the schools can provide a lot, but we need broad community support to make sure that kids are getting educated. And that, all that, I'm also, we haven't really gotten back to the county council part, but you can see where a lot of this is going. Providing, making sure that there's affordable housing for people in their communities. Because if people don't have affordable housing, then that constant stress looms over them of being evicted or actually being evicted. I know of students who've lived in their car with their family. And things that you don't think kids should have to deal with while they're trying to go to school. And so, all of those experiences and the experiences that I've observed from my kids, and they're my kids. I've got a few thousand at this point because I've been teaching for 15 years. But, the experiences that they've had, I think, are the inspiration for what do we do? What steps do we need to take? So, and like I said earlier, COVID has just, amplified all of that.
Yes, and it's definitely a challenge, but it's worth it to persevere through everything. It's worth it because we're not going to be in this pandemic forever. So I think that a lot of us we just have to keep that in mind. As long as we continue to move forward, and as long as we continue to do our best to follow the protocols and to use all of the resources that we need and that we have to our advantage. I think that is what's going to, move us forward, because, this is not going to last forever. We will come back to a sense of normalcy at some point. But, like you said, we have to, be sensitive to everybody's circumstances right now, because you may not know what, a little boy or a little girl or even an adult may be going through right now. So we all have to demonstrate that level of sensitivity, during times like these, and we all have to demonstrate some level of flexibility, and we all have to accommodate each other. We all have to, I wouldn't say look out for each other. We all have to be mindful of each other, and we all have to work together in order to, push through this together. So that is definitely important. And, like I said, I'm a sociology student at UMBC. I worked for MDE previously, and as an author and as a radio personality, the work that I do I always try to do my best to, to uplift children with the work that I do as an author and as a radio personality, networking with people, in the prospective fields, and also just doing my best to just highlight, inspirational people, on my show, and like even with the work that I do with my poetry and my writing and with my own personal experiences dealing with self-esteem issues, self-image issues, and just doing my best to be as authentic as I can be. That's why I created this broadcast. That's why I created this platform, so that kids could find an outlet in a young person like myself to represent that and to model that. So that's what this is all about. So if a young person wants to enter into the field of public service like yourself, or if they want to become an educator, what are some of the takeaways do you think they should keep in mind in terms of trying to pursue a career, in these fields? Because it's not for everybody, and some people feel they don't figure that out until until they just hop right in, and they don't take time to just really think about this from a long-term lens, because some people, they just hop right in. They may not understand the pros and cons of it. They may not understand what the possible outcomes may be. They may not know all of the ins and outs of it. So what is your advice to someone who wants to enter into the field of public service, or a young person who wants to be an educator?
I would say for both of those things, be prepared to work your tail off, because there is so much work to be done in both areas, that you've got to, and I think you have to have a certain passion for it, because that's what allows you to, that's what allows you to continue to just, put in the long hours for your kids at school or for your constituents. So I think, really believing in what you're doing is important. I think it's so important in both fields. In education, we talk a lot about relationships, and relationships come from understanding, and understanding comes from listening. And listening, you get the opportunity to listen by asking questions. So asking questions and listening, I think, is so important. It's funny, you think of the teacher, they're the ones that are supposed to be answering the questions, right? But they need to be asking the questions too, and finding out, there's an expression, meet your students where they are. And you don't know where they are if you don't ask. So you have to find out where they are. And I think that's true in politics as well. In elected office, your role is to serve the people that you represent, and make decisions that will impact them positively. And you need to know where they are, what it is their concerns are, or what their obstacles are, and just do a lot of listening to try and figure that out.
Yes, and that's definitely imperative, and it's definitely important for all of us to do that. If we want to be leaders, and if we want to be role models and examples, we have to listen, and we have to be open to learning new things, because you cannot learn if you cannot listen. So that's definitely important. So I know that this, like I said, for this entire month, I'm celebrating Women's History Month with all of my female guests, and I do know that it's imperative to have women in leadership positions, and even women in public service. And we celebrated International Women's Day yesterday. So we've highlighted women in so many different fields and so many different occupations. So before we wrap up the interview, what are some of the takeaways that you've gathered, as a woman in a leadership role, as an educator, your work as an attorney, as a councilwoman? What are some of the key takeaways? What are some of the things that you've learned in terms of what it means to actually be, a woman in these fields, and what it means to actually fight against a lot of the double standards that exist nowadays?
I have to say that I think in the field of education, because it's got so many women in it, and ironically, the Anne Arundel County Council is a 7-member council, and 5 of the 7 women right now are women, or 5 or 7 of the members are women. And the two guys are great too, and they work really well with their 5 female colleagues. So in that way, I in a way I've just been able to sort of be myself and haven't felt this sort of had to stand up for myself as a woman, especially in the council, because we're not just the majority, we're a super majority of the members on the council. In terms of education, I do think that there's a lot of, sort of broader, I think the field of education doesn't get the respect it deserves, in large part because it has been a female dominated profession. And I think it's seen as, I hate to say this, but you've heard the expression glorified babysitter. And I think that there's still some of that lingers. And I think that a lot of people have the mindset that, well, I've been to school, I've been a student, so I could be a teacher. And the reality is it's quite different on the other side of the desk or on the other side, facing the other direction in the classroom. So, that's frustrating too, because I think everyone is an expert on education, even though, and in a way we are, we are experts in our own experience of education, but that doesn't make us experts on teaching. And so I think, sort of that I would like to see the teaching is definitely both art and science. It's a personal, you have to have a personal connection, but you also have to have a knowledge of your subject matter. You have to have a knowledge of pedagogy, which is how you teach something. And so all of those pieces put together make it a pretty challenging profession. Like, I don't have a boring day in teaching. There's no such thing. So yeah, I hope I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it definitely did. It absolutely did. So how can any of the listeners who may live or know someone who lives in your jurisdiction or may live in the areas that you represent, the neighborhoods that you represent in the Anne Arundel County Council, how can they reach you and how can they get in touch with you, or how can they address any problems that they want to bring to your attention, especially, for 2021, because we're still in the beginning of the year?
So I think the easiest way is to email me, and I'm happy to share my email here. I don't know, like if I type it in a chat somewhere, is there a way you can display it, or I can type it in the chat?
Well, I can do it myself because I've already emailed you. I've already met you, so I can definitely put that in the show notes afterwards.
I do not mind. In fact, I hear from multiple constituents every day, and I try to help every single one of them resolve whatever concern or issue. Sometimes it's not as quickly as I would like or as they would like, but I try, to make sure every question comes with a resolution.
Well, again, I would like to, as we wrap up, I would like to thank you again for taking time out of your schedule to join us this evening. We went a little bit over time, but I wanted to give us, an extra time to talk about what we needed to talk about. And so we could, make up for all of the technical difficulties we had. So I would love to have you on my show again for the future. I'm going to close the audience out, with the thought of the night. So, before I let you go, I just wanted to thank you. And I just wanted to know that you're appreciated. And you're essential throughout this entire, pandemic. So thanks again for tuning and for joining. And I know that the listeners are going to feel inspired, and this is definitely going to spark up a conversation, with families, as we continue to move forward.
And we have to, we have to find, I think we have to find ways to support families. We have to do, that $15 minimum wage. To me, that's got to happen. We need to make affordable housing more affordable. I mean, I think we need to push for Medicare for all. So I just wanted to get in those last thoughts because I really think that those are the kind of things that are going to make the difference in the long run. So, and I just want to say thank you so much for including me on your show. And I think your show is really awesome. And I have much admiration that you took on in the middle of a pandemic saying, hey, I'm going to start a radio show. So that's really, really cool to just, find ways to have conversations. So thank you too.
Yes, and like I said, you definitely take care. I'll be in touch with you for a show, in the future, so you can come back on to, give us updates about what you've been doing and everything else. So,
Awesome. Be great to hear from you. All
thank you. I will definitely speak with you soon. I'll keep in touch.
right. Take care. Thanks a lot.
You too. So that wraps up the Beauty in Us radio right here on Awesome God Radio for this evening. We went a little bit over time, but I wanted to make up for all of the technical difficulties we've had. But again, I want to thank you all for tuning in once again. I want to thank you all for just working with us through all of the challenges that we've had in terms of just navigating through all of the technical difficulties. They definitely, had their challenges, and they've definitely, they've tried to beat us, but we've been able to push through all of that. So next week we are going to have another guest with us this evening, right here on Awesome God Radio. So make an appointment to meet me back here at 6 p.m. on March 16th, 2021 at 6 p.m. Make an appointment to meet me back here to meet our next guest. And I will be revealing the next guest this Friday. I usually post that Friday before the following week for the show. But I just want I want to thank you all for tuning in once again, because we are entering into month 6 of the Beauty in Us radio right here on Awesome God Radio. And the support from you guys has really, really helped me along the way. And, I've been experiencing many, many challenges throughout the course of, the pandemic, and even like within the 6 months that I've been doing the show. But I want you all to know that I'm still prayerful and I'm still hanging in there. So next week we are going to have Miss Tracy Garner. She's an author, an award-winning author, a romance writer from Virginia, and she's a member of the disability community. So she's going to be talking to us a lot about the work that she does, not just as an author, award-winning author, but also as a disability advocate and as a member of the disability community. And we're going to examine different. I'm going to pull up some stats, and I'm going to do some research about how we can all help the disability community, during these tough times, and how we can shed a new light and a better light on people who may be a part of the disability community. So thanks again. I love you guys, and I will see you next Tuesday.